It was a crisp Sunday morning in a quiet town, where nothing much ever happened. The sleepy streets were lined with simple houses, and the church stood in the center, its steeple reaching for the heavens. That morning, a hush of anticipation swept through the town as an unexpected announcement spread like wildfire. Former President Donald Trump and his young son Barron would be visiting the church. The congregation was abuzz with excitement and curiosity. The pews filled quickly, neighbors whispering to one another. Many wondered why such high-profile figures would come to their humble town. Meanwhile, the church's priest, Father Matthew, prepared his sermon. He was a man of deep conviction, but today he carried an inexplicable heaviness in his heart. When the Trumps arrived, escorted by discreet yet unmistakable security, all eyes turned to them. Donald held Barron's hand firmly as they walked into the church, his usual confidence replaced by an unusual solemnity. Barron, tall and quiet, scanned the room with an almost shy curiosity. The service began like any other, but Father Matthew's voice trembled as he reached the pulpit. What he would say next would change everything. Father Matthew began with the usual prayers, his voice steady, but his eyes betraying an inner storm. Donald Trump bowed his head respectfully, while Barron sat quietly, fiddling with a ribbon on his Bible. The congregation listened intently, yet an undercurrent of unease rippled through the room. As the priest spoke, his words took an unusual turn. "We gather here today not only to worship, but to confront our deepest truths," Father Matthew said. His gaze swept across the congregation before resting on the Trumps. The air grew thick, every word he uttered hanging heavily in the silence. Barron looked up, his blue eyes wide with curiosity. Donald shifted slightly, his expression hard to read. "I must speak about what has been weighing on my heart," Father Matthew continued, his voice now quivering. "In this sacred space, we often focus on judgment rather than compassion. But today I am compelled to speak of forgiveness, of humanity, and of how the smallest gestures can transform the world." Donald's eyes narrowed slightly, his protective instincts rising. Barron, however, leaned forward, captivated. At that moment, Father Matthew took a deep breath and made a statement that left everyone in stunned silence. "Mr. Trump, young Barron," Father Matthew said, his voice trembling yet resolute. "I must confess something. Years ago I judged you harshly, not as a man of faith should. I spoke words that were unkind, words that spread division rather than understanding." The congregation gasped. Barron turned to his father, confusion flickering across his face. Donald, composed but visibly intrigued, nodded for the priest to continue. Father Matthew's voice cracked. "But the truth is, I did not know you. I did not see your humanity, your struggles, or your capacity for love. I only saw the image the world painted of you." Tears welled in the priest's eyes. "I was wrong," he confessed. "Today I seek your forgiveness, not as a priest, but as a flawed human being. I realized that by judging you, I was failing to live the very message I preach, love without conditions." The church was silent. Barron's lip quivered, his young heart clearly moved by the raw vulnerability of the moment. Donald, uncharacteristically quiet, placed a hand on his son's shoulder. What came next from the former president shocked everyone even more. Donald Trump stood slowly, his towering presence commanding the attention of every person in the room. He didn't speak immediately. Instead, he glanced at Barron, whose eyes shimmered with emotion. "Father Matthew," Donald began, his voice calm yet resonant. "I've been called many things in my life, some true, some not. But rarely have I seen someone stand before a crowd and admit their faults like you just did." The congregation was riveted, breaths held in anticipation of his next words. "For years, I've been painted as larger than life, often misunderstood. But the truth is, I'm a man, a father, trying to do right by my family and my country." His voice softened, and for a fleeting moment, he seemed vulnerable. "Hearing your words today reminds me that no one is perfect, not even me." Barron reached for his father's hand, his small gesture speaking volumes. The room felt electric with emotion. Donald looked directly at Father Matthew. "I forgive you, not because it's easy, but because forgiveness is what brings people together. Today, you've taught us all a lesson in humility." The congregation, teary-eyed, erupted in applause. As the applause faded, Barron surprised everyone by standing up. His cheeks were flushed, and he hesitated before speaking. "Can I say something?" he asked, his voice soft but steady. Donald gave him a small nod, his pride evident. Barron turned to Father Matthew. "I think what you said was really brave," he began, his words simple but heartfelt. "Sometimes people don't see the real us, but it's nice when they try to understand." He looked around at the congregation, his youthful innocence piercing through the tension. "I get nervous in front of people, but my dad always tells me to be strong. Today, I think you showed us what it means to be strong too." Tears flowed freely in the audience. Parents clutched their children tighter, touched by Barron's sincerity. Even Father Matthew, usually composed, couldn't stop a tear from sliding down his cheek. Barron sat down, his cheeks pink with emotion. Donald patted his back gently, his pride for his son palpable. The atmosphere in the church shifted. It felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. No one could have anticipated what would happen next. Just as the congregation settled, a quiet stir emerged at the back of the church. All eyes turned to the tall, graceful figure stepping forward, Melania Trump. Her presence was magnetic, her beauty striking even in her simplicity. Melania, typically reserved, had been seated discreetly among the guards, observing everything in silence. Now she moved with purpose, her heels clicking softly on the wooden floor. Reaching the front, she paused. Her gaze swept over Donald, Barron, Father Matthew, and the congregation. Finally, she spoke. "In my life, I've learned that true strength is not in speaking loudly, but in showing kindness, even when it's hard," she said in her soft, accented voice. "What happened here today is a reminder that we all have the power to heal, to forgive, and to love." Her words, though few, struck a chord. She walked over to Father Matthew and extended her hand. "Thank you for your courage," she said sincerely. The priest, overwhelmed, took her hand. A spontaneous standing ovation followed, filling the church with the sound of clapping and heartfelt cheers. And just like that, the church became a symbol of unity. But the story wasn't over yet. The standing ovation echoed long after Melania had taken her seat. People whispered among themselves, wiping tears from their eyes. The simplicity of the moment, a family united, a priest humbled, a community moved, had ignited something profound. Father Matthew returned to the pulpit, his hands trembling as he adjusted his notes. "Today I've seen something extraordinary," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "The courage of a boy, the grace of a mother, and the forgiveness of a father. This is what faith truly looks like." The congregation nodded, many clutching tissues or holding onto loved ones. Among them was a single mother who had been estranged from her brother for years. She felt a sudden urge to reconcile. Across the aisle, a man battling bitterness toward his boss decided to let go of his resentment. Barron noticed these quiet changes. "Dad," he whispered, tugging on Donald's sleeve, "do you think we made a difference?" Donald smiled warmly at his son. "I think you made a difference, Barron. You reminded people of something important." But outside, the scene unfolding was just as powerful. A growing crowd had gathered, drawn by whispers of what was happening inside the church. By the time the service ended, the news of the Trumps' visit and Father Matthew's revelation had spread across the small town like wildfire. Dozens of townspeople who hadn't attended the service stood outside the church, waiting for a glimpse of the family. As Donald, Melania, and Barron stepped out, applause erupted. Cameras from local news stations captured the moment, and smartphones went live on social media. Barron held tightly to his father's hand, his face a mix of surprise and wonder at the overwhelming reaction. One young girl, about Barron's age, pushed through the crowd with her mother. In her hand was a small bouquet of daisies. "These are for you," she said shyly, extending them to Barron. Barron smiled, his shyness melting for a moment. "Thank you," he said softly. Donald and Melania watched, visibly touched by the spontaneous act of kindness. Donald leaned down and spoke to the crowd. Today isn't about me or my family. It's about all of us learning to forgive, to love, and to see the humanity in one another. The crowd grew quiet, moved by his words. A sense of unity filled the air, but one final moment would seal the day in everyone's hearts. As the family prepared to leave, Father Matthew approached Donald with a simple request. Would you and your family join me in a prayer for our community? Donald glanced at Melania, who nodded gracefully. Barron, still holding the daisies, gave a small smile. The priest led them in prayer, his voice strong yet tender. He prayed for healing, understanding, and unity, not just for the town, but for the nation. As he spoke, a soft drizzle began to fall, the drops glistening like tears under the sunlight breaking through the clouds. Unbeknownst to anyone, a photographer in the crowd captured the moment. Donald holding Barron's hand, Melania with her head bowed, and Father Matthew lifting his arms toward the heavens. The photo would go viral, symbolizing a rare and poignant moment of connection in a divided world. As the Trump's car pulled away, Barron turned to wave at the crowd. He noticed people hugging, smiling, and wiping their tears. "Dad," he said, his voice filled with awe, "I think we helped more than we know." Donald smiled and squeezed his son's hand. "You're right, Barron. Sometimes it only takes a little light to break through the darkness." By the time the Trump's car reached the edge of town, the photo of their prayer moment had already begun circulating online. Social media platforms buzzed with reactions. Hashtags like Yarn Unity Prayer and Darn Barron Speaks trended globally. News outlets picked up the story, framing it as a rare and heartfelt glimpse into a family often shrouded in controversy. Barron's simple yet profound words during the service were quoted widely. "Sometimes people don't see the real us, but it's nice when they try to understand." Back in the car, Donald scrolled through his phone, noticing the outpouring of positive comments. "Barron, you're becoming quite the spokesperson," he said with a grin. Barron blushed, leaning against his mother. "I wasn't trying to do anything special, Dad. I just wanted to say what I felt." Melania stroked her son's hair, her usual reserved demeanor softening. "The truth from a child's heart is more powerful than any speech," she said quietly. Meanwhile, the small town's residents marveled at the attention. For them, it wasn't about fame. It was about the change they felt within themselves. People began reaching out to one another, mending old wounds, and forming new connections. The ripple effect had begun. That night, back at their hotel, Barron sat by the window, gazing out at the quiet town. "Dad," he asked suddenly, "why do people fight so much? If we can feel like this today, why can't it happen all the time?" Donald, seated across the room, looked up from his laptop. His expression softened. "That's a tough question, Barron," he admitted. "People see the world differently, and sometimes they're too proud or scared to understand someone else's point of view." Barron frowned, thinking hard. "But it doesn't make sense. It feels better to be kind, doesn't it?" Melania, sitting beside her son, hugged him gently. "It does, Barron. But not everyone has the courage to show kindness. What you did today, speaking from your heart, reminded people of something they'd forgotten." Barron leaned into her embrace, still troubled, but beginning to understand. "I just wish it could stay like this," he murmured. His parents exchanged a glance, their shared pride in their son evident. "Maybe," Donald said thoughtfully, "it can. If enough people keep trying, one small act of kindness can grow into something much bigger." The next morning, as the Trumps prepared to leave town, the hotel staff delivered a stack of letters to their suite. "These came for you," the concierge explained, placing the bundle on the desk. Curious, Barron picked one up and read it aloud. "Dear Barron, I'm a kid just like you. My parents fight a lot, and it makes me sad. When you spoke at the church, it made me feel like things could get better. Thank you for being brave." Barron's voice wavered as he finished reading. He looked at his parents with wide, teary eyes. "They're talking to me?" he whispered. Donald ruffled his son's hair affectionately. "They're talking to the real you, Barron. The one who showed them it's okay to care." Melania opened another letter, this one from an elderly woman. I haven't spoken to my sister in 20 years. After hearing your words, I called her. We're meeting next week. Thank you for helping me find the courage. The family sat together, reading letter after letter, each one a testament to the impact of their unexpected visit. By the time they left the hotel, they carried not just the letters, but the weight of newfound hope. Later that evening, a primetime news broadcast highlighted the events at the small-town church. The footage of Donald, Melania, and Barron in prayer, combined with Barron's heartfelt words, played on screens across the nation. The anchor, a seasoned journalist known for her impartiality, paused mid-broadcast, her voice breaking slightly. "I've reported on countless stories, but rarely have I felt this moved," she admitted, wiping away a tear. A boy's simple truth reminded us all of something we've lost, our ability to see the good in each other. The segment ended with a replay of Father Matthew's prayer and Barron's thoughtful words. As the broadcast went viral, people everywhere shared their reactions online. Families began discussing forgiveness over dinner. Friends reconnected after years of silence, and strangers found solace in the Trumps' example. Back in their hotel room, Barron sat with his parents, scrolling through the reactions on social media. "It's like everyone's nicer," he said, his voice tinged with wonder. Donald nodded, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "Sometimes, Barron, people just need a reminder that kindness isn't weakness. It's strength." Melania, her eyes reflecting quiet pride, added, "And you, my son, have given them that reminder." The small town that hosted the Trumps' visit felt forever changed. Father Matthew's church, once sparsely attended, now welcomed people from across the region. Some came to hear his sermons, others to see the place where the moment of transformation had occurred. Local businesses began collaborating on community projects, inspired by the spirit of unity, sparked by the Trumps' visit. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in years shared meals and laughter once more. At the center of it all was Father Matthew, who had become something of a local hero. Yet, he remained humble. "This wasn't about me," he told a reporter. "It was about a family showing the world that even in the most divided times, love and understanding can bridge the gap." He hung a framed photograph of the Trumps in prayer on the church wall with a simple inscription beneath it, "Let light lead the way." When Barron heard about the transformation during breakfast, he smiled shyly. "I didn't think just talking would do so much," he admitted. Melania kissed his forehead. "You didn't just talk, Barron. You spoke from your heart. That's why people listened." As the Trumps prepared to head home, Donald received a call that caught him by surprise. On the other end of the line was an old friend turned rival, someone with whom he hadn't spoken in years. "I saw what happened at that church," the voice said. "I've been thinking a lot about our history. Maybe it's time we bury the hatchet." Donald was quiet for a moment, processing the unexpected gesture. "It takes a big person to say that," he finally replied. "Maybe it's time we both moved on." After the call ended, Donald shared the news with Melania and Barron. "This world surprises me sometimes," he said with a chuckle. Barron, thoughtful as always, chimed in. "Maybe it's because people want to be better, Dad. They just need someone to start it." Melania smiled. "And that someone, Barron, was you." As the family boarded their plane, the townspeople gathered to wave them off. Barron, holding the bouquet of daisies, waved back, his heart full of hope. Days after returning home, Donald sat at his desk, inspired to write an open letter to the nation. The events at the church and Barron's bravery had stirred something deep within him. He titled it, "A Time for Healing," and began with these words. "Sometimes, the simplest truths come from the youngest voices. My son reminded me, and the world, that seeing the good in each other is the first step toward unity." In the letter, he reflected on the importance of forgiveness, empathy, and kindness. He spoke of the small-town priest who dared to speak his truth and the power of a boy's heartfelt words to bring people together. The letter was published across major platforms and resonated deeply with readers. Comment sections flooded with personal stories of reconciliation and gratitude. Barron read the letter that evening, his eyes shining. "Do you think it will help more people, Dad?" he asked. Donald placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "I think you've already helped more people than you'll ever know, Barron." Melania added, "Words written from the heart reach the hearts of others. This letter will remind the world of what truly matters." A week later, a package arrived at the Trump residence addressed to Barron. Inside was a beautifully handcrafted wooden cross, along with a note from Father Matthew. "Dear Barron, this cross was made by a member of our congregation as a token of gratitude. Your words have touched countless lives, including mine. May this remind you of the light you brought to our small church and the world. God bless you. Sincerely, Father Matthew." Barron held the cross in his hands, feeling its smooth surface and marveling at the craftsmanship. He turned to his parents, his voice filled with awe. "I didn't think something so small could mean so much." Melania hugged him tightly. "It's not the size of the gesture, Barron. It's the love behind it that makes it powerful." Donald placed the cross on the mantle, where it would serve as a daily reminder of that extraordinary day. "You've left a legacy, Barron," he said. "One built on kindness and hope." On a quiet evening, the family decided to film a short video together to share with the world. Sitting side by side, with the wooden cross in the background, they spoke from their hearts. Donald began, "We've been through many challenges as a family, but what happened at that small-town church showed us the power of forgiveness and love." Melania continued, "This world needs more understanding, more listening, and more kindness. It starts with each of us, in our homes, our communities, and our hearts." Barron finished with his signature sincerity. "I just want to say thank you to everyone who shared their stories and letters. It means so much. If we all keep trying, maybe the world can feel like that day at the church, peaceful and happy." As the video ended, Donald looked directly into the camera. If this story moved you, if it made you think or feel, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your words might inspire someone else to take a step toward kindness and forgiveness. Together, we can make a difference. The video went viral, sparking a global conversation about hope, love, and unity. And for years to come, the day at the church remained a beacon of what was possible when people chose to see the best in one another.